Before we begin, may I request everybody to switch off their cell phones, please? Good evening and welcome. FAAA Talks is a platform that brings unique insights from the practice of professional architects and designers. This talk today by Sudhir Jambhekar is organized by Faculty of Architecture Alumni Association, which is FAAA, in association with the Gujarat Institute of Civil Engineers and Architects, GICEA. Our speaker today, Sudhir Jambhekar, is an architect and urban designer with nearly 50 years of experience on a wide variety of project types and scales across the world. He is a senior principal at FAAA, a very prestigious firm in New York. Sudhir joined FAAA as a senior partner in 2000 when the firm he co-founded, Jambhekar Strauss, merged with FAAA. Sudhir approaches design as a perceptive search for meaning and usefulness, narrowing the infinite possibilities for a project to an idea that balances the forces at work in each. Over his long and prolific career, Sudhir Jambhekar has received numerous awards as recognition of his work, and most recently, he has been recognized as Fellow of American Institute of Architects. Sudhir has an MS in Architecture from Columbia University and a B.Arch from University of Bombay. With this, may I please invite Sudhir Jambhekar on stage.
Thank you for that introduction. It's always embarrassing to hear about yourself in front of many people, particularly in front of my wife, you know. Having said that, thank you for inviting me. Thank you for thank you FAAA, right? AAA. And then Gujarat Institute of Civil Engineers and Architects for organizing this, inviting me. Dr. Bimal Patel was instrumental in bringing these two groups together and making this happen. I assume he will be coming here shortly. Having said that, I'm really delighted to be here. I am grateful for organizing this. I am grateful that you are attending this, and I am honored and humbled. With that, I am equally pleased to present and talk about recently released books called Thinking Design, and I am equally pleased to present some select projects from those books and talk about how design decisions have been influenced by climate and culture. My approach to design, as was already stated, is perceptive search for meaning and usefulness, narrowing infinite possibilities for a project to an idea that balances the forces at work in each. What that simply means is that inquiry before you start the project is essential, and searching or exploring for ideas is as important. With that, I would like to talk about a little bit about these e-books. There are a total of 10 e-books being published at the same time. These books cover a wide variety of projects that I have done over the last 20 plus years. Some of them are built, some of them are not built, but it doesn't matter. It explored many different ideas. All of this work was done by me and in the firm of FAAA, and it is all directed or led by me in collaboration with many people. As you know, as the projects get larger, the collaboration is absolutely essential, and that includes collaboration with partners, colleagues, many younger folks in the office, and many engineers and many contractors and construction managers, and so on and so forth. So this is a culmination of all of that collective effort of so many, for which I am actually shamelessly taking the credit for all of that. Having the climate, by the way, is a critical component, and I truly believe that as we are getting global and as we are all beginning to look very similar, especially when I travel all over the world, when I go to Japan or I go to India or I go to China and I go to US, younger generation for some reason is looking extremely similar. They all have the same iPhones and iPads and have information available that none of us had many years ago. Due to that, we are all getting very similar. We influence each other much more. The information available is very easily accessible. And so the question arises is that as the time goes on, do we need to differentiate from one from the other? Should the architecture in Japan be different than from China or US or in France or in England? And perhaps it should be, because if you talk to most common person, they feel that maintaining the culture, heritage is important. They all feel that the cities are looking all alike. And there are many reasons for it. So the question is, if we decide as a society, if we decide as the designers that we want to differentiate, how do we differentiate? And my view of it is that perhaps the climatic differences between the different parts of the world will remain constant, meaning they will remain to be, Alaska will remain to be what it is, and Saudi Arabia will remain to what it is. And if the designers, architects, planners, urban designers give due consideration to the climatic conditions, perhaps there might be a difference between what we build in the US versus what you may build in India. This is not the only reason, by the way. There are many other reasons, but I'm trying to oversimplify in some ways. But so the climatic understanding is essential in my opinion. And in the past, a lot of the architecture which was designed was basically done on intuitive basis. We're talking about 100 or 200 years ago. Now, today we have technology that is available where we can literally analyze everything, including, besides the temperature variations, we can literally test every aspect as it is shown in these drawings. We can go from absolutely to the heat gain control issues to energy saving issues, analyze it to depth, and come to a pretty much an answer that we all need to get at the end and design on that basis. So the point I'm making is none of us have any excuse anymore, including myself, not to be responsible and address this very serious issue because climate is changing and population is increasing and land is not increasing anymore, at least at the moment, The other aspect is cultural aspect. We all seem to make a mistake, including myself, in lumping the groups together, saying all Middle East, for example, this one, taken the image of Middle East specifically, that all people are alike or similar. The fact is that when you go, and India actually, you would know this better because every 50 miles the language changes, culture changes, people change, their thinking changes, their all aspects of visions change and aspirations change. Similarly, in the Middle East is the same story, by the way. You go from one place to the other place, and the thinking process is very different. I mean, I have worked from Dubai to Doha to Saudi Arabia to Bahrain to everywhere, and people are so different that it is very fascinating. And if that aspect is given due consideration, the designs could be amazingly interesting in my view. So climate and culture do matter. They will make the difference. And perhaps the architecture might be a bit distinct or distinguishing from the other places. And as we all know, by the way, the climate does influence the culture. The clothes, the way we wore at one time, were influenced by the climatic conditions, And this you can only know when you are in Middle East and you get caught in the sandstorm. You realize why their clothes are the way they are, It makes perfect sense. Similarly, religion also played a major role in our thinking in terms of defining cultures. And as an architect, by the way, most architects logically do think about the site configurations, site conditions, responding to the local aspects, and hopefully they also sort of explore many different ideas. So this is one example of the way I have done in the past, that besides making the project site specific, I do explore many ideas and then come to a conclusion that this might make the most sense. So is the critical inquiry in my mind is very important for designing a good projects. This particular aspect that is about how we deliver the projects, particularly the large scale projects, and with the globalization, by the way, which is actually doing some wonderful things, this is an example of a project, a museum project that I designed. And we had a team of people from all over the world working simultaneously, working off of the same server. For example, we had a museum consultant based on Paris, because she had done a lot of museums and knew a lot about museum programming aspects. And we had engineers working from Stuttgart who knew exactly what should be done for engineering some aspects of engineering. And then we had cost consultants from UK, and the team was based in the US, in New York and in Bangalore. And we were able to get the expertise of various folks and to design this museum, which was a huge project. The point simply to make is that in this global world, I think we all have an opportunity to capitalize from each other's strength and therefore in turn create a better product design, architecture, urban design, whatever it is. I think if the egos are slightly kept in check, we can all do better things and make the big difference. The other thing that I have believed in and I practice it very, very rigorously is to work in a collaborative manner with the folks I work for and work with. The clients are an important part of that collaborative process. So are the engineers, so are the contractors, so are the construction managers. But the most critical component is the internal team members with whom I have worked over the years. And my experience tells me that the younger mind actually is far better than the mind of people of my age. And I have tremendously benefited working with a lot of young architects on various projects, because their ideas sometimes have no constraints, and therefore I think I benefited from that, and I urge all of you to try that. I think it is amazing. The end results have always been better than if I had done the projects myself. I truly believe that. So and so this is one of those sessions that I had in the office with a group of architects. With that, I'm going to talk about the books themselves. As I said earlier, I'm publishing 10 books at the same time. Each book has number of projects. I can only show select projects. Book E01 is about the cultural and educational competitions. All architects are used to doing competitions. It's part of our lives. It is a very challenging process to do competitions, but the reason we do the competitions, and I'm sure you do as well, so that our creative juices flow during that time. We have no constraints. We are able to explore ideas to even a higher level. As a result of that, the products and projects and designs that we create and the competition phases or stages are sometimes amazing, and interesting. The drawback is that we have no interaction with the client, and we have no interaction of understanding the vision of the client, and so therefore it has its own minus side as well, because ultimately the clients are the ones who own the buildings, they occupy the building, and so on and so forth. So, but regardless, I think it's still amazing process to do it's very tiring, by the way, but it's still exciting to do the competitions. So this was a competition for Perth Amboy High School, which was where four of us were competing. I don't want to take the names of all. They were all well-known architects, by the way, all US based. And we explored an idea in this particular school was, because this school was located in Perth Amboy, that Perth Amboy neighborhood is of a lower middle class, working class community. Many of the children or the kids going to the school were not likely to go to the colleges or university education. So therefore, intention of the design in this particular case was to create an environment by which the maturity of these younger kids would be much faster. So by the time they come out of the school at a high school level, they would be ready to face the world. And therefore we created a campus-like environment for specifically to this project. Idea being empowering the students. In turn, they also learn from what they see, and therefore we created this academies. It's almost like a university campus, and created this environment which I thought would help. And the idea was to create basically permeable and accessible campus. So therefore it's totally transparent in many ways, and this is what I'm trying to show here. It was all permeable, it was very accessible at the same time. The other competition I'm going to show after this book, first book, is the Central European University, which is CEU, based in Budapest, Hungary. An amazing city, by the way. I mean, most people know of Prague, and I think Budapest is more interesting. It's much more baroque than actually Prague in many ways. This university was started by George Soros, by the way, a multi-billionaire. And it was based on the idea of an open society. And it was based on the idea that literally international students would come together and learn in sort of collaboration with each other and being exposed to each other's culture. It is amazing to see students of all faces in the middle of Budapest. I mean, it is really amazing. And as most institutions grow over time, this institution also grew over time, and so therefore it has a lot of these small buildings, and they had one building, and then they had another building, and they kept on acquiring, and they grew to a point where now they had no choice but to figure out what to do next, and so therefore, and it is in a downtown Budapest. So what we came up with was, we said, what is the great idea of American campuses? And it's the quadrangle, You go to Harvard, you go to Columbia, you go to any of these schools, you go to Princeton. It's the quadrangle which becomes the focal point where the students interact and go through and all of that stuff. So we said, why not create a quadrangle but internalize it, because there is no space for this campus. And thus we came up with this idea of a internal quadrangle space around which a lot of activities took place. The buildings, surrounding buildings were rather of different heights and age. So we designed a roof structure which essentially was distorted and deformed to meet those responses as well, and then admit the daylight and create a center space for the students. Amazing, by the way, number of buildings and auditoriums and all kinds of things were done. In the book itself, there's a lot of details, by the way, of all of these projects. The second book is about bridges. I've been very fortunate to have an opportunity to design typologies that most people do not get, by the way, and so I'm very, very grateful to many people who gave me these opportunities. So the second book is about bridges. I've designed a number of bridges. I enjoy designing bridges. And the critical thing about the bridges, by the way, it's a very important component of the built environment. And it is a very important component in many ways to basically create a signature for the cities and the places as well, besides just functional use of taking people from point A to point B. In case of this particular bridge, which is in Dubai, the clients came to us and suggested a simple straight bridge, almost like a causeway bridge, and yet they wanted a presence. Their alignments didn't make any sense to us, so we started to take the challenge and working with engineers, as fruitful as it is equally challenging at times, because once they have drawn the lines, it becomes difficult to convince them sometimes that this is the right. But we were able to convince to change the alignment because it made sense. Vertical alignments, horizontal alignments, we changed all of that. Instead of a single bridge, we came up with an idea of creating a double arch bridge, but yet it would create a fluidity. And it had a lot to do with the cultural aspect, because the fluidity of this bridge comes out of this sort of Arabic script, which has a tremendous fluidity as well, and so on and so forth. So the other thing we did for this particular bridge was that we were able to convince the clients that in spite of the fact that the heat is quite intense and humidity in Dubai is pretty bad at times, we're able to convince them to create a pedestrian walkways. We put them under the main decks, and we created a comfort zones all along so that people can still walk, and created this double arch bridge, which creates a singular statement by creating a lot of islands and all of that. Basically, the bridge is in steel, by the way, with a concrete below. About 1,600 meter span with a tall arch, about 200 plus meter tall. It's taller than many buildings, by the way, in Dubai, so it's enormous in scale. And our bid documents are ready, so we'll see what happens now. As a part of this bridge, they asked us to design a station, a metro station, because over the bridge, there was a metro line which was going to cross called the Green Line. So we designed a station, and we designed a station as if it's a living thing, meaning it literally breathes, And the way we designed this was with this material, which is similar to the Beijing Olympic the pool thing, so that the daylight is admitted, but then if you look at it, it has the gills like things, openings, and so on and so forth. And it has a lot to do with the way we sort of thought about. I don't have too many drawings here, they are all in the books, but the idea was to create a side platform station, so when the trains go through the middle of the station, it would essentially push the hot air out, and it will be thrown out from the top, and then the slightly cooler air would get in, and the space that you would air control or temperature control would be minimum to a platform level, which is what this shows. And then the roof structure is made out of this material, ETFC, I believe, so that during the daytime there'll be no artificial lighting required whatsoever. So it was very interesting. And if I go back one slide, if you look at the image at the bottom, we were thinking, our lighting designer, we were thinking about designing the lighting in such a way that when the train arrived, you knew the train was arriving, and when train departed, you knew. So if somebody decided to run to catch the train, that person knew when to start running and when to stop running. So it was an interesting experimentation. Uh, the third book, which is about one client, by the way. There was one client in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, which gave us projects worth in construction value about 2.5 billion US dollars, by the way. About 12 buildings. They're all built except one which is under construction. And it is a part of a large financial district called King Abdullah Financial District. About probably 15 to 20 architects are working on that site, by the way, besides us. So everybody is there, from Foster, you name it, they're all doing buildings there. And we were lucky to get quite a bit of that work as well. So this is a project for a museum, and I think it is worth stating that while doing another museum, I had devised this mathematical formula called approach equals understanding plus ideas multiplied by process. It simply means search to infinity to find the one right solution. That's all it means. So we and that's what we do, by the way. We kill ourselves exploring ideas. So in this particular museum, by the way, the way we drew this museum, the way we came up with this design was that some of you may know there are a couple of historic, actually, World Heritage sites in Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabian culture actually came from Jordan area into Saudi Arabia, and Al Turaif, if I remember the name correctly and pronounce it correctly, they used to have a triangular openings in their structures to admit the daylight and filter the daylight, and we took that as a clue and developed the idea for the museum, which has a very limited openings, allowing very limited daylight, filtered daylight into the gallery spaces. It was a singular statement that we made. Project is very complex, by the way. This is almost 900,000 square foot building. So pardon me if I'm simplifying things, because I can talk about this one building for an hour or two. So anyway, so to make the point, by the way, we did go through, as usual, a number of ideas, number of models, number of options to convince ourselves what made the most sense. And then those are the schemes we presented to the client, and ultimately they accepted the scheme that we currently have. This is the interior space. Actually, it's a secondary space, by the way. It's not even a gallery space. Just to tell you one error that we made, which is, and we all make these errors, by the way. This is Arabic script, by the way. On this side is mirror image. Our renderers who did the renderings didn't know, and neither did we knew it, that it was in reverse. So, but they knew it right away that this was incorrect. So, but it doesn't matter. It was about a scale for us, and nobody objected to it, and so on. For the same client, by the way, we did buildings. These are two buildings. One is an office building, one is a residential building. And without dwelling too much on it, just to talk about one aspect of the project, how climatic condition influenced us on this one. If you look at the facade of that side, that facade basically in plan has a faceted form, which is directly facing the south. It has a laminated marble on a glass, and the facade therefore creates an opaqueness and translucency at the same time, having the vision windows facing towards the east. Very simple idea, expensive idea, I may add, but we were fortunate. The client didn't object to the money aspect. It's actually almost built now. This is all finished, and it's amazing that during the daytime from inside, the building creates this translucent quality. It's like, for those of you who have seen the tomb of Utmat Uddawla, I believe, in Agra. If you go into that, it's like a little marble jewel box, that tomb, and you go into it, and you see you feel the translucency of the stone. It's sort of similar idea. And then one of the American architects many years later sort of was inspired by that, I believe, or some other things as well, and did a library at Yale, which does the same thing. And it's amazing to go into the library and experience that translucency of the material. So we took that idea and then explored it on this to create and respond to the climatic conditions. The same client, by the way, gave me an opportunity to design a mosque or a masjid, which is already built. And it is remarkable that a non-Muslim like me was asked to design this mosque, And the first question that came to my mind when the client insisted that we do it, I said, what do I know of Islamic religion or any of the aspects of Islamic religion or rituals or anything? So they said, no, you can do it, and we will guide you. And so we did, and it's built, by the way, and it is beautiful, and it looks great, and it won a lot of awards, and it is publicized quite a bit as well. And in this particular case, I don't think I have, actually I have one drawing which I can just talk about a little bit. The mosque essentially floats on a very shallow body of water for two reasons. One is it acts as an evaporative cooling element, but other thing is that all religions, by the way, all faiths and religions and different parts of the world have perceived how this world was created very differently. In Hinduism, of course, it was the churning of the sea, and on. And then in Islam, as I understood it at least, and they didn't disagree with me, at least on my interpretation, was that they say that the God appeared and placed his throne. They do say he is, by the way, his throne. Nobody knows it was he or she, but nevertheless, it's his throne. And then went on to create the world as we know, And I have the Arabic script of it, or Quranic verses of it. And so we said, well, then let's float this mosque in a simple manner on a body of water, and then began to create this design. And it is built, by the way, and it is wonderful, and it looks great, and the clients love it. And to our surprise, recently another client saw this masjid and asked us to design another masjid. So we'll see what happens. Anyway, the book 4 is about projects in India. The first project that I was given an opportunity to design in India was in Mumbai, 60-storied building, completely different typology from other buildings. And what we came up at that time was idea of stacked boxes. And they were representing the functions, each function very differently, and addressing some climatic aspects as well at the same time. The box in the middle that you see is basically a hotel lobby space, and the hotel rooms were placed below, and then the residential components were on the top. Some of the other images of that. In Noida, one of the clients asked to design a housing for a middle income group, and we said, well, let's try it. And so we did. And it's a very simple, those who are and I'm sure many of you know Lou Khan's work. It's clearly inspired by his work, and reinterpreting it in a very different way. It's essentially a simple idea of sheer walls and flat slabs, and creating smaller apartments with a total transparency on both sides and optimizing natural ventilation. None of these buildings were centrally air conditioned, no mechanical systems, totally natural environment. But we had to really work on the angles of wind conditions and we did it. And unfortunately, it didn't get built. I have some diagrams of the angles. That brings me to book number 5. This is about the towers. So these buildings, most of the buildings in the book are about 300 meters and up. And I have to say that, by the way, designing bridges and tall buildings, there's some similarity. It really is amazing to sort of create these structures of such a large scale that it sort of not only can create a signature for the cities or wherever they are, but it can also create a great place of pride for the people of that city or a place. And so it is very interesting. It's very challenging to work on these kind of projects. It has its own unique challenges. These buildings were 400-meter tall. The tallest building was 400-meter tall. And to give you a simple idea, by the way we did this building, was a residential building, was that we placed the tallest building in such a manner that it would cast a shadow onto the shorter buildings, and therefore it would automatically do some passive sort of energy saving ideas. And the entire water heating system was based on the external screen, which was going to rotate the water and then warm the water and then supply it through the apartments. It was residential buildings, by the way. And the residential buildings of this scale with small floor plates are very challenging to design. So they were designed as if they're tripods. So it's just like a camera tripod. So you tied at 3 different places. Structural engineers were WSP. I mean, brilliant engineer, by the way, who worked with this. And so here are the plans of those. That brings me to another tower that was designed in also book 5 for Al Faisaliya. For those who know history, King Faisal was the founder of Saudi Arabia, and there is a foundation under his name called Faisaliya Foundation, or King Faisal Foundation. And here is a great example, by the way. There's a plan there, and even some of the great well-known names make such basic errors, and this is a good example of that. Foster designed a tower which you see in the pointed manner, but the way that tower was placed was in the middle of the site, and he created a loop around that with the low buildings, completely ignoring the entire site rather than unifying the site. So it was like a fort within a fort, kind of a thing. So when this project was we were asked to look at, our first reaction was to first fix the master planning aspect of it, and try to create a unified whole environment for this entire property, like Rockefeller Center in New York, and then place the tower and design a tower on that basis. And the screens, as you can see, they vary in grades, they do a lot of different things. The notches, by the way, they're always in shade, so we did a lot of interesting things on this. 77-story tall building. Lower floors were office, upper floors was hotel rooms, and the retail down below. There was also a masjid, by the way, on this one, which we were asked to design. And now, this is a story to be interesting, by the way. There is exactly on the same site, there was a mosque designed by Kenzo Tange, an amazingly good building, by the way. But we made a decision to tear it down. And the reason it was decided with the clients, not by us alone, was because it did not work anymore. So pragmatic aspects played a role, and then we were designing another mosque on the same location. I mean, it was very heartbreaking in some ways to tear down a master's work whom some of us, at least when I grew up, I looked up to Kenzo Tange's work. It was an amazing architect. And here I was proposing 30 years later to tear down one of his buildings. It was very, very challenging. But anyway, I thought I mentioned that as a point. And so here's a section, here's the lobby of the hotel in the middle. Book 6 is also about the towers, but they're basically in Asia and Canada. And I'm going to show you one project that I'm currently working on. This is for a corporate headquarters in Nantong, outside of Shanghai. It's on the other side of the Yangtze River. A wonderful Chinese client, by the way, amazing client. Extremely respectful of architects and very respectful in terms of what you want to do and achieve and so on and so forth. So, but this particular and I'm going to show you some slides of exploration. Many ideas were explored, and finally we came up to this design. But I want to tell you a story about this. When we were designing this particular building, our plan ideas were, I mean, you know that the Chinese people think that they're the people of dragon. And so the dragon shows the movements and so on and so forth. So we came up with this plan idea where it has a tremendous movement and it emerges into a tower. Think that it would be amazing, you know. And here we are, we presented the scheme, and he thought the tower reminded him of the lotus. Completely different, and lotus is, by the way, as sort of symbolically important in the Chinese culture. And he just fell in love with the building regardless, because it does certain things in a certain manner. But our thoughts were very different. He saw it differently regardless. We came to the same conclusion. I said, fine, it is, it is, you know what it is. So it is interesting how the clients perceive sometime and how we perceive things. Book 7 is about transportation. By the way, I've done a lot of transportation work. A lot of it is already built. And I want to just talk about this for a second. I truly believe that it is important to think about infrastructure as a critical component of the built environment, one that benefits from good design and suffers without it. I think it's extremely important to think about infrastructure work very seriously, and all architects should take this particular typology very seriously, because this is, I think, can make or break the cities, you know. I was designing a second avenue, so I'm going to show one example. I've done a lot of work, by the way, on infrastructure. A lot of it is built. But I'm going to show you this project. This is a Second Avenue subway, which is in New York. They were working on this project for 40 or 50 years. Finally, it came to fruition. It is an enormous project. The total phase was started from 125th Street all the way to Wall Street area. So 8.3 miles, billions of dollars, because all below grade construction and so on and so forth. So I was a chief designer, and to talk about this very briefly is that, and to give you some fundamental information, the stations, by the way, below grade are fundamentally of two types. Either you do cut and cover, meaning you go from top above, you cut it, put the station, close it. Other is what the deep stations or tunnel stations, which are done by the tunnel boring machines, just like the earthworm, you know. It goes underneath and it digs the hole, and it creates these tubes. And so you have to balance the act between the two depending on many factors, including, what did I do? No, I'm okay. So it is an interesting typology. And then the transportation work, by the way, of this nature, it goes beyond, it's like the bridges, it goes beyond the, you know, just the architecture. It's a combination of architecture, urban design, landscape architecture, wayfinding, combination of so many disciplines come together, because ultimately these stations and systems have to connect to the community, you know, so it's very important. And New York is uniquely different in many ways, that the stations, and this is the DNA of New York, by the way. When the station is done, the platform lengths are about 800 feet for X number of cars, I believe eight cars. But then by the time you add everything, it becomes about 1,200 to 1,400 feet long, with all the ancillary spaces and all of that. But if you look at the New York subway system, the entrances, they go literally like tentacles. And the reason for that and which is very typical in New York, is that essentially their thinking is to take the station entrances to the as close as possible to the community. So each of the stations have these tentacles, and then you will have 10 entrances sometime at one station, take you to the one, or 4 or 5 is very common. And it's not so common, by the way. This is not done so commonly everywhere else, which is very uniquely different. And climatic aspect, one aspect I want to explain about the tunnel, you would wonder what do you do for underground systems, you know. So two things: admit a daylight, if possible, and there are many ways to do it. It makes the huge difference in how you feel underground, you know, number one. And the second thing we did in this particular case was that we were not going to air condition the stations, but we were going to only air temper the stations. And this is a game of psychology, meaning these subway systems or below grade systems, they're transient spaces. You're not going to occupy for them for more than 10 minutes. You go in, you wait, you get the train, and you leave. So for a transient spaces, psychologically, if the outside temperature is, let's say, 100 degrees, and the inside temperature is about 90 degrees, for those brief moments, you feel comfortable. By the time the train comes and you leave, so you don't have to necessarily air condition, because they bring down the temperature to 65 or 70 degrees, which is assumed to be, or between 65 to 75, assumed to be a comfort zone for a human body. So this is the kind of things that we did by doing. We were able to do some clever things and energy savings and on and on and on. So very challenging project, though, I must say that. I did a project in Baghdad, by the way, but I was not brave enough to go there. It was the presentation was actually the day American forces were leaving, and I was so nice that I sent 2 of the people from my office, and they were scared to death when they went there and made a presentation. But it was interesting. This is a stadium project for a capacity of 100,000 people for soccer stadium. And interesting thing about this station was its facade treatment and the way we dealt with actualities and the cultural aspect were interesting, you know, in many ways. And we were trying to relate to the downtown Baghdad and immediate surroundings and on and on. The entire screen was created out of screen made out of stainless steel, and we were thinking of playing with the color stainless steel and so on and so forth. So to create a comfort, and these were the sections through the sections and models of the actual stadium sections as well. 100,000 capacity stadium, by the way, is enormously large. Sight lines become a problem. And fortunately, we had a good consultant from London who worked with us, and they figured out some way to fudge those aspects. I believe 90,000 is the maximum that they've figured out so far to do it well. Anyway, this did not happen. It didn't get built. The politics changed in Iraq, and Iraq is, as you know, politically is in a mess. Lighting, some interesting ideas were explored as well. Another competition I did very recently actually was in Istanbul, and it was for a housing project. It was mostly a housing project of a low scale and middle scale, of a middle scale building typologies. And so we were wondering what we can do to these buildings which would make it somehow, which would make some sense out of middle of nowhere, you know, in some ways. So object made sense, courtyard made sense, facade treatments of various kinds made sense depending on how we respond to the client, and thus the solution, you know, that emerged out of it. And another project in Istanbul for marina. One simple thing I can tell about this project was Istanbul is a city, by the way, as you know, has the Bosphorus and the Sea of Marmara. If there are 2 things or 3 things you will remember about Istanbul is is topography, the body of water, and amazing food, So with that as a background, so the question was, and people are outdoor, they're outdoor going people. So what we did for outdoor spaces was to, how do you prolong the time so that people can spend more time outdoors? And we played a simple idea. One simple idea that we were playing was, we were going to do an external underfloor heating system by just circulating the seawater and creating the outdoor atmosphere in such a way that it create a little bit more comfort zone. And we did something, another interesting in this particular case was, there was a retail and we created a bridge-like structure on the top, and that bridge-like structure was going to give them the FSI free spaces, which would then be used for exhibition, for outdoor exhibits and things of that nature. And they thought it was amazing. Nobody thought about this, to create a FSI free space, but we were able to accomplish with that a definition to the whole site, as well at the same time. So, and this is the public space. Book number 9 has urban design projects. I've also done a lot of urban design work. Just to show you one project in Dubai, this is under construction, by the way. They're building it on a very slow pace. It was for a 500-acre site, 77,000 people to be accommodated. So what we did was, key was, we implemented infrastructure which would support the public transportation system, sea water system, and then created these 8 neighborhoods by which each resident, each part, would have either a water or an internal garden spaces, and we dealt with the scale issues of the various building types. This was just a commercial area, one of the zones in that whole thing. So, and lastly, the last book I want to just talk about is the book 10, which is about my earlier work in New York City. When me and my partner Mark Strauss started our firm, as was mentioned, Jambhekar Strauss, we started to do this earlier work of a very different type, but it became the foundation for evolution over the next 20 plus years. And this is a small project that was given to us at Lehman College at that time. It is built. You will be surprised to hear, after these millions of square feet, this is a building of only 2,000 square feet. So it's a tiny little, they wanted us to design a gatehouse. We took that as a challenge and we said, let's do it. And one small thing to mention about is that American campuses used to be an open campuses. And then in the 60s, 50s and 60s, they began to put their walls around. Because of the Vietnam War, there were a lot of uprising, there were a lot of oppositions, and compounds came, the walls came, and all of that. So the common complaint that happened around the campuses in US were that communities were feeling that they were left out of the campuses. They were not as welcome. So we said, what do we do? How do we do it in our small way? How do we make the difference? So what we did was, we took this gatehouse, put the most important part outside. It's still within the property line, but it's outside the compound. We modified the compound wall. So when you arrive at this entrance, you don't feel that you're crossing the borders of any kind. This glass, unfortunately, security is an issue. So this glass, by the way, is a bulletproof glass. But it does reach out to the community as an entrance piece. And it is very successful. The client just love it. The canopy structure has the nautilus shape, which essentially draws you in at the same time. And with that, last just one slide, 2 important quotes in my mind, by the way. I love the writings of Bruce Mau. And this is for all architects here, by the way, and all designers and all communities, is that he is saying that massive change is not about the world of design, but it's about the design of the world, which means we should design everything, every aspect of the built environment. Even a simple billboard plays an important role as to how it participates in the city. And I think it is very critical that we all push for it. So our cities are better, our environment is better. And then the John Hockenberry's statement is equally, or quotation is equally good, is perhaps only the sensibility of design that can mediate between the poles of meaning and noise. How true it is, It can literally mediate between the meaning and the noise. There is a lot of noise, by the way, in the city. The visual noise sometimes can be unbearing, And so it is important to keep that noise under control so that we all have a better built environment. That brings me to the ebooks. The 10 ebooks I already talked about. I want to give some credits here very quickly. The publishers of these ebooks are Book Ganga. There are two owners, partners here. Mandar and Gauri are here. They are the publishers of these books. These books are also, by the way, I forgot to mention early on, they're bilingual. I made an effort to write in English and then translated the English into Marathi side by side, which is very common in Asian countries, by the way, China, Japan, all over the places. Their magazines are side by side, bilingual. And so I said, why not us? So I did it. So the translation of the is done by a writer, well-known writer from Pune. She is here as well, Sulba Ternikar. She wrote all the Marathi translation. And of course, a hard work by many others, by the way, and not to mention my wife's patience. So this is where we are at. These books are being released. Book Ganga are the publisher, Another book I want to mention is the FX File monograph, which was published last year. I brought a copy, by the way, for you, your library. And I'm happy to give that book. It has the work of all our partnership, so it's not just me. These ebooks are all about my work. This monograph is about the firm's work, so I have only 3 or 4 projects. Every partner has 3-4 projects, so that's how we've done that book. And that was published by ORO. And then the last one is my autobiography, which was published in Marathi. Again, it was the Shabdankan is done by Sulba Ternikar in Marathi. And then it was published by Rajahans out of Pune. Not to worry, it is translated in Gujarati, called A Vishwanu Prangana. And the translation is done by one of your well-known writer from Ahmedabad. He is here, Kishore Bhai Gaud. He has translated a lot of books, so he has a good command on Gujarati and Marathi both. And the translation is really wonderful as well, by the way. And these are the pages from the inside of these books to give you an idea. With that, I'm going to tell you, just take 2 more minutes. Is that okay? 2 to 3 minutes. I'm going to make an attempt to speak in Gujarati and tell me whether my Gujarati is still okay. And I'm going to tell you my personal story, મારો જન્મ અમદાવાદમાં 72 વર્ષ પહેલાં થયો. મારા બાપુજી અને મારા બા અને અમારી ફેમિલી ભદ્રમાં રહેતી હતી. હું અમદાવાદમાં મ્યુનિસિપલ સ્કૂલ, એ વખતે આ ઇન્ડિપેન્ડન્સના પછીની વાત છે કે જ્યારે ઇન્ડિયામાં રિસોર્સિસ નહોતા, કંઈ જ નહોતું એ વખતે. ત્યારે અમે લોકો ત્યાં મ્યુનિસિપલ સ્કૂલમાં હું મારા ભાઈઓ બી, મારો એક ભાઈ છે અહીંયા, અમે બધા મ્યુનિસિપલ સ્કૂલમાં ગયા. પછી ભદ્રમાં એક મરાઠી સ્કૂલ હતી, MSM હાઈસ્કૂલ, ત્યાં અમે મરાઠી શીખ્યા. પછી હું મુંબઈ JJ કોલેજમાં ગયો. પછી JJથી હું અમેરિકા ગયો, એટલે ત્યાં થોડું કામ કર્યું મુંબઈમાં. પછી અમેરિકા ગયો અને ત્યાં પછી કોલંબિયામાં ગ્રેજ્યુએશન કર્યું, આ કર્યું, પછી કામો બધા. I also Chinese architect by the name of IMPE. I worked with IMPE for quite a few years. I was a partner at Cohn Peterson Fox for years before I established my own firm at Leh. History is long. I'm over 72 years. Having said that, one thing reminds me of Ahmedabad, and which I always remember it. As a kid, અમે જ્યારે યંગ હતા ત્યારે પારસી શબ્દ મારા મોઢામાં આવી રહ્યો છે. હું મુંબઈમાં પારસી આર્કિટેક્ટ જોડે કામ કરેલું એટલે એ લોકોનું ગુજરાતીનો થોડો ઇન્ફ્લુઅન્સ છે. અમે લોકો એ વખતે સાબરમતી નદીમાં તરવા જતા હતા, ડૂબકી મારવા જતા. તરવા શું, એમાં એ વખતે પાણી જ નહોતું, અમે ત્યાં ખાલી ડૂબકી જ મારતા જતા હતા એ વખતે. એ વખતે જો એવું ખબર હતે કે આ સાબરમતીનું પાણી પીધાને ડૂબકી માર્યાથી આપનું નસીબ આટલું ખુલી શકે તો કદાચ બે ચાર ડૂબકી વધારે મારતે. With that, thank you so much for coming. Thank you, Bimal, for inviting.
Would you please throw little more light on the environmental aspects, the sustainability, and the present issues of global warming and other things? How do you incorporate them in the design? You know?
Yeah. Actually, environmental issues are very extremely serious, by the way. On a very fundamental level, as we all know, the total land mass on the earth is about 27 or 28 or 29%. The rest is body of water. Current population in the world is about 7 billion. It is anticipated to be about 10 billion in the near future. Temperatures are going up. Recently, United States was hit very hard by number of things, and New York was hit very hard as well. And so we have to take this thing very seriously. And my opinion is, by the way, about 20 plus years ago, when this LEED certification process and LEED and all, it was a good start. It is not sufficient. Now we are thinking about passive house level of standards. So zero energy creation, zero water, zero this, zero that. So, and to give you a background of my firm in that regards, by the way, in Manhattan, we had designed a building called 4 Times Square, which used to be known as Condé Nast Building. They were the occupiers. It was the first tall green building, as they call it, was designed by anywhere in the world. US government has a paper on that, but that was 20 years ago. Now what we did then looks like nothing, you know. And it had all the bells and bells and whistles, you know. We experimented with, for example, photovoltaic panels on that building in those years. Not effective. They didn't do a job that they were supposed to do. But they did a lot of other things which are very functional and they work well. I've designed, by the way, a transportation structure which generates the power by solar energy. But the panel system is still not as efficient as it should be. You know, it doesn't generate enough energy. Water, on the other hand, there's a lot of progress made on the water. Energy also, there's a lot of progress made. But what we are doing currently is not sufficient. It is not sufficient at all, by the way. So I don't know where this will all go, but I think my opinion is, by the way, if each one of us try to make the difference, I think it may make the difference, you know. I mean, to tell you the truth, by the way, when I grew up, I remember in Ahmedabad, recycling was not a sustainable thing. It was part of life, you know. તમને બધાને ખબર જ હશે, ન્યૂઝપેપર બધા ભેગા કરીને એનું એ કરીને પછી કંઈ વાસણ એના એક્સચેન્જમાં વાસણ મળતું હતું. It's a good idea that existed here, but now suddenly everybody's driving a car, so it's a problem in some ways, you know. And of course, United States is the worst, by the way. It's one of the biggest polluter in the world. There's no question about it. There's absolutely no question about it. And so we have to do, I mean, I live in US, so I need to talk about US. I mean, we have to do a lot in the US as well. There's no question about it. And all the Western countries have to do the same, you know.
My name is Soren. I have visited your studio in New York, FX Fall, and one of my friend was working in 2007, 2008, Pan. Now he's in China, but he also
Who? What is
Pan,
that?
Pan?
Oh, I know Pan.
Yeah.
He's in Shenzhen.
Yes.
Yeah, I know. He worked with me directly, yeah.
Yes. And he really appreciated your sort of involvement and sort of your encouragement to young architects at that point of time when I was around. And you also sort of mentioned about a lot of energy you have, you know. You still, you know, sort of travel a lot around, but when you're back in the studio, you sort of interacting with the architects and try to see what is new coming out of that. So that is one question is, you know, about, you do a lot of competitions and, you know, in the corporate structure of FX Fall, how do you manage to sort of work on a lot of competitions, you know, because there are also financial constraints with which you are doing, and I've seen, you know, the energy you put in. I've visited FX Fall 9 o'clock at night, and you were still working in your corner and sort of doing things. So how do you manage this financial balance of doing a lot of competitions?
With great difficulties. That's why I don't wear a tie, I don't wear a jacket. I can't afford to do any of that stuff. No, I'm just kidding. But thank you for the compliments, by the way. I think I did say that in the beginning, by the way. I truly believe that if we all work with the younger generation as our equals, I think the design would and usually reaches the higher level than at least, I mean, I've said that, I admit that openly, and I give a credit to a lot of the people that I work with. About the competitions, by the way, it is a very challenging aspect of balancing between finance and doing it, because each competition, it doesn't matter how much money they give you, we still end up losing money. There's no question about it. And however, having said that, the way we have done it over the years is that we do about maybe 4 to 5 competitions in a year max. And it sounds like a lot of competitions, but that's all we do. And then the other thing we do is for each of the competitions, if it's an open competition, we don't participate. Open-ended competitions are like the chances of your winning are so minimal that we don't enter them. Then there are competitions which are usually, they will ask you to do a competition without compensation. We will not do those competitions either. We will not, absolutely refuse to do those competitions as well. So for all the competitions we have done, we have been compensated for. Not sufficient, but we have been compensated for. But your point is well taken. We lose money no matter what happens. That is very challenging. So the way we do it is we allocate a X percentage of money in the firm for competitions. And so you sort of assume that that percentage of your profit is towards the future and towards generating ideas and exploring and all of that. And so in those days when Pan was there, I was the only partner who was doing competitions. Others didn't do as much. Now others do it, so I don't do as much, you know. So, but such is life, you know. You know, I mean, I'm okay to go home at 6 o'clock, by the way.
સુધીર ભાઈ, મને પૂછવાનું મન થાય છે કે આપણે થિંકિંગ લખ્યું છે પહેલા. ફર્સ્ટ વર્ડ ઇઝ થિંકિંગ. આર વી થિંકિંગ રિયલી એનીથિંગ? આટલા બધું કામ કરવાની શું જરૂર હતી, મને એ કહેશો? આ ન કર્યું હોત તો ન ચાલે. આમાંથી કેટલા બધા નેચરલ રિસોર્સિસનો નાશ થયો એનો તમને કંઈ અંદાજ છે ખરો? આના કારણે કેટલું બધું પર્યાવરણને નુકસાન થયું, કેટલા બધા લોકોના હૃદયને હાર્ટ પહોંચ્યું કે ભાઈ અમારી પાસે આવું નથી. તો એનું શું કરવાનું? એની કરોડો માણસો ભૂખે મરતા હોય ત્યારે આટલા મોટા બિલ્ડિંગ બનાવવાની શી જરૂર હતી ભાઈ? તમે સાંભળો હોય મને.
નહીં, તમારો પ્રશ્ન પૂરો થાય પછી
પ્રશ્ન મારો બહુ મોટો છે.
હા, નહીં,
જસ્ટ અ મિનિટ, જરા મજા આવશે તમને. તમે કાંઈ જવાબ ના આપશો, આ મારો પ્રશ્ન જ જવાબ હશે. હું શું કહું છું કે દરેક શહેર છે ને એને પોતાની સંસ્કૃતિ હોય છે. તમે અમદાવાદમાં રહ્યા, બરાબર? અમદાવાદની પોતાની સંસ્કૃતિ હતી. અમદાવાદના આજુબાજુના ગામના માણસો સરસ મજાનું શાકભાજી, દૂધ, ઘી લાવી અને અમદાવાદની શેઠિયાઓને આપતા હતા અને બધા સુખેથી રહેતા હતા. કોઈને કોઈ તકલીફ નહોતી. તમે અહીંયા ફ્લાયઓવર શું કામ બનાવ્યા? તમે બીઆરટીએસ શું કામ બનાવી? હજી તમે પેલી ટ્રેન નાખવાની વાતો કરો. શા માટે આવું કરો છો? શા માટે તમે યુપીમાંથી, બિહારમાંથી, બંગાળમાંથી લાવીને માણસોના ઢગલા અહીંયા કરો છો? આ આર્કિટેક્ટની આ લોકોને શાંતિથી રહેવા નથી દેતા, એ આર્કિટેક્ટનો મોટો ગુનો છે. શું કામ નથી રહેવા દેતા? શા માટે તમે આવું કરો છો? તમે બીજો કરિયાણાની દુકાન કરો ને, તમે એટલું તો મળશે જ, તમારું રોજીરોટી ચાલે એટલું. તો આવું બધું નેચરલ રિસોર્સ, કેટલું લોખંડ, કેટલું સિમેન્ટ, કેટલી મજૂરી, કેટલા માણસોએ હાડકા ને ચામડા બાળી નાખ્યા ત્યારે આ બધું તૈયાર થયું. હવે તમને કહું કે આ તમારા યુએઈના કોઈ રાજાએ થોડા વખત પહેલાં, 15 દિવસ પહેલાં, મહિના પહેલાં કીધું હતું કે અમે મારા દાદા ઊંટ ઉપર સવારી કરતા હતા, પછી હું ઊંટ ઉપર સવારી નથી કરતો, મર્સિડીઝમાં ફરું છું. મારો છોકરો પણ મર્સિડીઝમાં ફરે છે, પણ એનો છોકરો હશે ને એ ઊંટ ઉપર ફરતો હશે. હું એને કહ્યું હતું, છાપામાં એના ફોટા, મને નામ યાદ નથી, ક્યાંક ગુજરાત સમાચારવાળા કહેશે તમને. હવે જો આ જ પરિસ્થિતિ થવાની હોય તો એ ઊંટવાળા આ તમારા સ્ટ્રક્ચર ડિમોલિશ કઈ રીતે કરશે? કેટલું આ થિંકિંગનો હું પ્રશ્ન કહું છું. આઈ એમ ટોકિંગ અબાઉટ ધ થિંકિંગ. આ થિંકિંગ આર્કિટેક્ટમાં હોવું જોઈએ કે ભાઈ આ તો કરીએ. તમે રાજા મહારાજોએ એક જમાનાની અંદર 500-700 મોટા કિલ્લાઓ બનાવ્યા. એટલા બધા કિલ્લાઓ બનાવ્યા. બધા રાજાને એમ હતું કે મારી પ્રજા બધા મોટા મહેલમાં રહેશે, પણ કોઈ પ્રજા મહેલમાં રહી નહીં અને એ અત્યારે ભારરૂપ પડ્યા છે. એને મેન્ટેન પણ કોઈ કરી શકતું નથી. આ પરિસ્થિતિ તમારા બિલ્ડિંગની નહીં થાય એની શું ખાતરી? એનો કોઈ દી વિચાર કર્યો છે?
હવે તમારો ક્વેશ્ચન પૂરા થયા ને? હું તમને એનું ઉત્તર આપું, સિમ્પલ, બહુ નહીં. હું તમને આ બાબતમાં ઉત્તર તમારી રીતે જ ઉત્તર આપું. હું એક વખત, મારો એક ક્લાયન્ટ હતો મોન્ટ્રિયલમાં, એનું પ્રોજેક્ટ મેં કરેલો, મોટો પ્રોજેક્ટ છે, બંધાઈ બી ગયો છે. તો એ ડેવલપર, હું એટલે આર્કિટેક્ટ, અમારી જોડે એક લોયર હતો અને કોઈ બીજી એક વ્યક્તિ, અમે 4 જણા હતા. અમે ત્યાં પેરિસમાં કે કાફે શોપમાં કોફી પીતા હતા. તો અમે અંગ્રેજીમાં વાત કરતા હતા, તો બાજુમાં કોઈ બેઠેલો હતો, તો એને લાગ્યું કે યાર અંગ્રેજી બોલે છે, તો આ કોણ છે લોકો? એટલે અમારી જોડે બોલવા લાગ્યા કે ભાઈ આ તમે ક્યાંના છો, આ ક્યાંથી, આ જેમ પૂછે તેમ. તો પહેલા માણસે કીધું કે હું લોયર છું, અને આ ટ્રુ સ્ટોરી છે. તો પેલો માણસ એવો કે તમે લોયર, આખી દુનિયાને સત્યનાશ કરી નાખ્યો, કે તમારી જેમ જ બધા, એ જ બી એવું જ કહેતો હતો કે હવે સત્યનાશ કરી નાખ્યો, કે બધું ખલાસ થઈ ગયું છે, પણ હવે લોયર સિવાય ચાલતું બી નથી એટ ધ સેમ ટાઈમ. હા, નહીં, એવા જ નહીં, ઇટ્સ ઓકે. હું તમને એક આન્સર આપીશ. બરાબર. નહીં પણ એનીવે એટલે એને કીધું કે હું લોયર છું, તો પેલો તો એકદમ એ કે તમે બધું સત્યનાશ કરી નાખ્યો, આ છે તે બધું, એટલે એનું પતી ગયું. પછી મારો એટલે હું આર્કિટેક્ટ છું, તો એવો એને એકદમ ગુસ્સો આવ્યો કે ચાલો આર્કિટેક્ટ તમે તમારી જેમ જ એ બોલતો હતો કે તમે લોકોએ આર્કિટેક્ટો આખા દુનિયાનો સત્યનાશ કરી નાખ્યો છે, કે તમારે તો કે એટલે મારે કહેતો હતો કે તમારે તો અહીંયા જીવવાનો બી હક નથી, તમારે બધાને પેરિસમાં હતા ને કે બધા આર્કિટેક્ટોને કે આપણે મારી નાખવા જોઈએ એમ એવું. મેં કીધું ભાઈ સારું, ત્યારે ઓપિનિયન જે છે તે કે, અને એટલામાં અમારી કોફી પૂરી થઈ, અમે જતા રહ્યા. તો મેં લોયરને કીધું ડેવલપરને કીધું કે સારું કે તારો ટાર નહીં આવ્યો, તને તો છોડતી જ નહીં, અહીંયા જ મારી નાખતો. પણ હવે આ જે છે તમારી જોડે હું કોઈ દિવસ બીજી રીતે આ ડિસ્કસ કરીશ, કોઈ પ્રોબ્લેમ નથી. એનું એક જ છે, આ કરવાની જરૂરત નથી એ વાત સાચી છે, પણ કરવાની બી જરૂરત છે એટ ધ સેમ ટાઈમ. એ બેલેન્સિંગ એક્ટ છે. એનું કારણ સિમ્પલ એ છે કે આજે દુનિયાનું પોપ્યુલેશન વધી રહ્યું છે, અને એક કનેડિયન પ્રાઇમ મિનિસ્ટરે એક વખત કીધેલું કે આજે ટાઈમ એવો આવ્યો છે કે આજે આપણે, તમે ઇન્ડિયન છો કે તમે ઇંગ્લિશ છો કે તમે બ્રિટિશ છો, એવી રીતે વિચાર ન કરતા એક માનવ જાતિનો તરીકે વિચાર કરો તો આપણને કંઈક પ્રોગ્રેસ થશે, એવું એ પ્રાઇમ મિનિસ્ટર બોલ્યો. અને કોઈએ એવું કીધું છે કે બધા લોકોને એમ લાગે છે કે આજે ટેકનોલોજીના લીધે આપણે એડવાન્સમેન્ટ થયું છે, પણ એનું કહેવું એવું છે કે આજે લોકો વર્લ્ડ વાઇડ આ ગ્લોબલાઇઝેશનમાં, થોડું અંગ્રેજીમાં થોડું મને સ્વિચ કરવું પડશે, આ ગ્લોબલાઇઝેશનની વર્લ્ડમાં આજે એટલીસ્ટ એક ઇમ્પ્રુવમેન્ટ થયું હોય તો આજે બધા લોકો એક સાથે એકબીજાનો વિચાર કરવાનો થોડુંક વધે. હવે આજે જો બ્રિટિશ લોકો બી કે જર્મન લોકો બી કે અમેરિકન લોકો બી કે રશિયન લોકો બી બધા આ બાબતમાં એન્વાયરમેન્ટનો થોડો વિચાર કરતા શરૂ થઈ ગયા છે. આ એક ઇમ્પ્રુવમેન્ટ છે. હવે કંઈ એક દિવસમાં તો આ કંઈ ફરક પડવાનો નથી. અને ટોલ બિલ્ડિંગ્સ કરવાનું કારણ એટલું જ છે કે જગમાં પોપ્યુલેશન નથી, એટલે ડેન્સિટી તેમ વધારો તે પ્રમાણે જમીન એકચ્યુઅલી વધારે બચી શકે. એન્વાયરમેન્ટ માટે એકચ્યુઅલી બેટર છે કે લોકો ચાઇનામાં 16મી સદીએ તમે ઇટલીમાં જુઓ, ટાઉન્સ બધા હતા જે જૂના, તે બધા કોન્સન્ટ્રેટેડ ટાઉન્સ હતા, પણ એ વખતે પોપ્યુલેશન એટલું બધું નહોતું. પણ આ બાબતમાં આપણે કોઈ બીજે દિવસ ડિસ્કસ. પણ તમારા પોઈન્ટ કંઈક એ આર વેરી રાઇટ ક્વેશ્ચન્સ, એટલે but they require serious answers, and I don't have all the senior answers because I am not as brilliant. I need to go and learn now few things before I can.
So
ના, અને આનો બીજો એક તમને કહું, on a personal level, I have lived in United States for almost 48 years, right? I have never bought a car in my life. I walk everywhere, હું બી જઉં છું, મારે પાસે બી થેલી છે, હજુ કહું છું તમને. પણ these are personal choices I made or my wife has made. I mean, I can't demand of those choices from everybody else, but I'm just saying but એટલે જ હું કહેતો હતો કે if all of us individually make a small difference, it may collectively make a big difference.
okay. Sir, one last question here. Sir, okay, last question before we bring this to a close.
So, as you said that you are inspired by youngsters, their thinking and all. So, what would be the positive points you would like to take from experienced people and youngsters?
Jawab, I'll give you in English, by the way. I truly believe that history is great to have, but a huge burden to carry. Experience is great to have, but a huge burden to carry the same way. Because experience means sometimes, by the way, we all, I, including myself, I get into my own way of doing things in a very fixed manner, and that's not always good. And so therefore, if I keep my mind open, and if I surround myself with the younger minds, younger generation, I have a possibility of learning or opportunity to learn from the younger generation, and therefore basically change, modify, adjust, whatever you want to call it, my own thinking in the process, in the interest of doing better things in life or contributing better things. હવે આ બી કરવાની જરૂરત નથી, પણ હવે શું કરીએ, આવી રીતે કરીએ છીએ. ચાલો, thank you so much.
Good evening, friends. The most valued invited speaker is Mr. Sudhir Jambhekar, members of the Institute, members of Faculty of Architecture Alumni Association, invited guests, students, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I want to introduce GICA with only 3 or 4 lines. GICA was established in 1947, friends. Right now we have more than 4,500 members, and all the members are architect or civil engineers. I think, as per my know-how, it is the only one institute, unique institute in India, having architects and engineers as a common platform. Now, on behalf of FAAA, GICA, we are grateful to have you here on this occasion. I would like to extend my heartily thanks to today's honorable speaker, Sudhir Jambhekar. You have come here for busy schedule. I also thanks to giving very informative and enlightening presentation on this subject. I also thanks Bimal Bhai Patel to be bonding of this presentation, Anand V. Tatu, Chairman of Institute of Civil Architects, Gujarat Ahmedabad chapter. I am also thankful to you all for remaining present here, attending this informative presentation. Thank you all.
Thank Thank you, Sudhir bhai. Thank you all for coming. Tomorrow at 5:30, the Gujarati translation of the autobiography is going to be released at Gujarat Vishwakosh Trust. Tomorrow at 5:30. That was just an announcement. And with that, I thank you all for coming. See you next time.